The last Halloween in my house started with the sound of packing tape tearing through a quiet kitchen. By October, I'd already folded half my life into cardboard. The realtor had staged the place lightly, which meant my photographs were boxed, the bookshelves thinned, the couch angled so the afternoon sun made the living room look like a catalog. A for sale sign angled toward Willow Street, the corner lot catching more wind than the others. I told myself I was ready. I told myself the quiet that settled into the rooms was proof I was making a clean break. I stood with a bowl of fun-sized chocolate bars, leftovers from the open house snacks my realtor claimed made people linger. The doorbell camera chimed occasionally. Witches, a kid in a cardboard robot, 2 teenagers who didn't bother with costumes. Every time I opened the door, a slice of October came in. Dry leaves, the bite of cold, a whiff of someone's wood stove. I smiled, said the line, "Take 2, save 1 for me," and went back to an empty kitchen that still smelled faintly of my ex-wife's cinnamon candles, although those had been gone for months. Around 8:30, the flow slowed. Little kids disappeared first, replaced by taller shadows. I planned to turn off the porch light at 9. The bowl was down to a scatter of caramel bars and a single lollipop. The boy in the clown suit appeared just before I killed the light. He was small, maybe 8, maybe 9. The costume wasn't the shiny kind you get at Target. It looked handmade, the red and blue triangles on the shirt slightly off-center, the white fabric smudged. The mask was the worst part. Plain white, no cartoon smile, just a printed red mouth that drooped a little too far. He didn't say trick or treat. He didn't say anything. "Hey there," I said, because silence makes you fill it. "Late run?" He held out a paper sack, not a plastic bucket. I could see the shadows of what he'd collected. A few bars, something lumpy like an apple. His hands were in gloves, thin, white, like part of the costume. The gloves were dirty at the tips, dark crescents where fingers ended. I dropped 2 caramels into the bag. He didn't move. "Okay," I said, adding the lollipop. "Last one for the night. Good haul?" He turned his head slightly, like he was angling his ear. The movement was slow, deliberate, like he was listening for something inside the house instead of responding to me. The porch light caught the edge of the mask. Under the chin there was the skin of a throat, pale. Then he lowered the bag, took a step back, and walked off without a word. I closed the door and locked it, more out of habit than worry, flipped off the porch light, and told myself, the quiet felt good. I poured the leftover candy into a Ziploc and opened my laptop to check a few last emails, the kind of procrastination you dress up as productivity. At 9:02 p.m., the doorbell camera pinged. Device offline. I frowned, knowing the Wi-Fi had been flaky. By 10, I had rinsed the bowl, clicked off the downstairs lights, and climbed the stairs past the bare nail holes where family pictures had hung. I brushed my teeth in a bathroom that echoed. In bed, the house settled. It's strange. Once you decide to leave a place, every sound starts to feel like it belongs to the house more than to you. Its breath, its throat clearing. Somewhere around 2 a.m., I woke to the feeling that something had changed. Not a sound exactly, the absence of one. The refrigerator's hum had clicked off, but this was deeper, the kind of silence you only notice when you're looking for a reason to be afraid. I lay there, holding my breath, and told myself I was ridiculous. Then I remembered the doorbell camera going offline, and let out a stupid, nervous laugh. "It's nothing," I said into the dark. The ceiling fan circled on. I didn't sleep well after that. I dreamt of boxes shifting, of tape peeling itself back. In the morning, a paper bag sat on my front step. It looked like a lunch sack, folded twice at the top. There was no writing on it. The porch was dusted with leaf bits, a smear of something like mud along the rail where trick-or-treaters had run their hands. The for sale sign creaked. I bent and picked up the bag and felt the weight of it. Surprising, dense. Inside, photographs. Not a lot. Maybe 20. Glossy 4x6s, fresh enough that my fingertips squeaked on them. The first three were my house, framed from the sidewalk, pretty if a bit hollow with the porch empty. The fourth was my living room, taken from an angle I recognized from the listing, the realtor's favorite shot. Only the lighting was wrong, and my jacket was on the chair, the jacket I'd thrown there after I got home from work last night. And the shadows in the corner weren't staged shadows. They were just darkness, thick in the corners where staged houses don't allow it to gather. The fifth photograph was my hallway, then the stairs, then the upstairs landing. The grain shifted. These weren't from a professional camera. They were from a phone, maybe, or a cheap DSLR. The next was my bedroom door. It was open a few inches. I flipped the photo over. No timestamp on the back. Of course not. The seventh was my bedroom. The angle was from low, from somewhere near the floor. The bed was visible, sheets lifted around a shape that was horribly me. An elbow, white in the flash. The shadow of my own head against the headboard. I remembered waking at 2. The silence. I tasted something sour. The eighth was my bathroom. Shower curtain half drawn. Steam on the mirror, the last of it, warping the light. Taken at a time I couldn't. My room doesn't hold steam for long. The fan is loud, efficient. Had it been last night after I brushed my teeth? The sink was dry in the picture. There were shots looking out through my bedroom blinds. The slats cut the world into thin strips. One photograph was of me again. Me, on my side. The sheet folded back to my waist. My mouth a little open. For a second I thought, absurdly, that the exposure had softened me, made me look younger. Then the realization that I was being photographed while asleep yanked the floor out from under that thought and left me on a drop I didn't know how to stop. Whoever had taken the pictures had stood in my doorway, or crouched. Whoever had taken them had stood in my bathroom, aiming the lens out between the curtain and the tile. I put the last picture back into the bag with fingers that felt hot and cold at the same time, and picked up my phone. The doorbell camera showed a red banner, offline. My router's app showed a disconnect around 9 p.m., a reconnection around 3. I hadn't rebooted anything. The police arrived in a dark SUV that flashed lights only at the intersection. A young officer with his hair too carefully cut walked the perimeter with me, while an older one stood in my entryway and asked questions that felt like accusations. Did I have a disgruntled contractor? An angry ex? Had I posted the interior photos of the house anywhere? Yes, I started to say, the listing. But he meant personally, like a tour. No. Was a spare key hidden? There had been one under a loose stone by the garden, but I had moved it months ago. Still, I heard the doubt in my own voice. The young officer pointed at the doorbell. Mind if I take a look? He popped the faceplate off with a practiced motion. Huh, see that? The black plastic had a scratch along one edge where the tiny reset pinhole was. Someone reset it, he said, matter of fact, like he was telling me the forecast. Internal battery drops after that, needs time to reconnect. How? I said. You have to have the tool, a paper clip or something. He held up his hand, gloved. Lots of paper clips in the world. The older officer looked through the photos with a face that didn't change much. He paused at one. Where's this taken from? Bedroom, I said. I mean the angle. I followed his finger. The picture looked low, yes, but there was also the feel of looking through something tight, a narrowness at the edges. The vent? I said. I pictured the rectangular vent cover low on my bedroom wall. No, I added quickly, like I could shut the thought down by denying it. That would be crazy. He didn't say it wasn't. He just made a note. They walked the rooms, careful but not reverent. Boots on the same floors I had refinished myself one slow spring. We pulled the vent covers. Bedroom, hallway, dust, a few coins, the missing Lego piece I thought I'd vacuumed years ago. Nothing else. The attic access hatch in the hallway ceiling had a ring of settled dust around it. The older officer stood on a chair and lifted it. A gray breath of insulation powdered the air. He shined his light and squinted. "Give me a minute," he said, hauling himself up. When he came down, his hair was dotted white. He carried a few things sealed in bags that he hadn't brought up: an empty water bottle, a twisted wire coat hanger, and a folded piece of thin plastic, like the kind painters tape over trim. "Someone's been up there," he said. "There's a flat spot in the insulation by the hatch. Not recent, not last night necessarily." He looked at me because he had to. "Was it you?" "No," I said. They took the photos, promised a follow-up, and left me with a suggestion, gentle, almost apologetic, that I might consider spending a night or two somewhere else. A friend's house. A hotel. I didn't. The stubborn part of me. The part that had watched a marriage end and refused to leave the house before the papers were signed. Anchored itself. I changed the front door's deadbolt. I put a chair against the bedroom door like I was a kid again, a tactic as effective as a rabbit closing its eyes. That night I brought the Ziploc of candy upstairs and ate 2 bars without tasting them, the sound of the wrappers too loud. I set my phone to record audio, hit "Do Not Disturb," and lay on top of the covers, dressed. The house made its little noises. The compressor kicking on, something ductwork ticking as it cooled, the soft click as the security light on the back deck triggered for no reason the human eye can see. At 1:40 a.m., a soft shush came from inside the wall. It was a whisper of drywall dust letting go. It was that or it was nothing, and my brain collected every version of that noise, mouse, expansion, memory, and fed them back to me as proof and counterproof. I got up and slid my feet into shoes. The hall felt colder than it should have. At the attic hatch, I climbed onto the chair, pushed up the panel, and aimed my phone's flashlight into the crawl, the rectangle of light swallowing the immediate dark and then struggling against the larger, hungrier dark beyond. Insulation glittered with mica. A roof nail pricked through like a star. There was a path, though, the place the older officer had described, flattened, a trough running along the joists toward a corner where 2 roof lines met. I pulled myself up and in, heart loud like a knock. The smell up there was old wood and hot dust. My light caught the corner, a slight nest, if you can call a person-shaped depression a nest, near the eaves, and beyond that, a sliver of raw plywood where a vent hadn't been mounted yet, or had been taken off for work, then never replaced. The sliver was directly over my bedroom wall. I lay belly down and slid forward, ignoring the itch of insulation against my wrists. The sliver widened into a view, an illegal keyhole, the gap between the drywall and the top plate above my bedroom. If someone lay here, silent and patient, they could hear everything. They could aim a lens down. They could wait for the exact moment the refrigerator kicked off, the moment the house felt like it was holding still to see who would move first. I backed up carefully, climbed down, and put the hatch back. The chair went back under it, not because it would stop anyone, but because I wanted the lie of it. When I played the audio the next day, the file caught 3 things I didn't want to hear. The creak I dismissed as the house, my own breathing, too fast, and at 2:04 a.m., the soft click of the doorbell camera coming back to life. It announces itself when it reconnects with a tiny relay pop. I'd never noticed it before. Now I would never be able to not hear it. The detective, because that's what the older officer turned out to be, came back that afternoon with someone from the crime lab. They dusted the attic hatch frame, the doorbell, the window frames upstairs. The lab tech was meticulous, quiet. When he finished, he peeled off his gloves and said, "No usable prints. Nothing worth lifting." He looked apologetic, as if he were a doctor delivering a minor but persistent diagnosis. The detective sat at my kitchen table and asked me again if I had enemies. I said no, which felt like tempting fate. He asked if anyone else had a key. I said only my realtor. He asked for my realtor's name and phone, and then, almost as an afterthought, "Have there been showings at night?" "No," I said. "We stopped those a week ago. No point after dark." "Good," he said, and wrote it down anyway. He called later to say my realtor had been cooperative, that the lockbox code had been changed last week, that they'd checked the digital log. He said the thing people say is a bridge between information and hanging up. We're on it. He also said something else. We canvassed the street again. Your neighbor across said a kid in a clown suit came by last night right at the end. Didn't say anything, just held out a bag. He left your porch and went to the house next door. Next door? I said. Mrs. Hargreaves had moved to assisted living in September. Her house had been staged, listed, and, as of last week, under contract. No one lived there now. There wasn't a light on, I said, hearing how useless that detail sounded. Right, he said. No one's lived there for a week. Maybe he just walked past, I said. He went up the steps, the detective answered. Camera across the street caught him. He didn't knock. He just walked in. That door's locked, I said automatically, because it had to be. Because the world works a certain way until it doesn't. Is it? He said. The detective met the property manager at Mrs. Hargreaves's place and called me from the front room. We found candy wrappers in the kitchen, he said. Footprints on the kitchen counter by the window, small prints. He paused. There's dust wiped clean on the sill, like someone leaned there for a while. Like a kid, I said. Like someone small, he said, his voice deliberately neutral. What about... I started, then stopped, because the thought felt melodramatic and also unavoidable. What about the attic? He didn't answer for a breath, and in that breath I imagined him tipping his head the way he had earlier, calculating, then deciding how much of what to say. We're checking, he said finally. The thing about vacant houses is they tell you a lot, if you let them. That night I slept at a hotel by the highway, ignoring the detective's gentle, not quite ordered to do just that by pretending it was my idea. The room had an HVAC unit under the window that droned steadily, a man-made ocean. I lay in that sound and thought about small hands on my windowsill, about gloves smudged at the tips, about a mask that covered a face completely except for a strip under the chin where a throat showed and a pulse might have been if I'd looked that closely. In the morning, the detective called. The lock on the back door at Mrs. Hargreaves's had the strike plate screws replaced, longer ones, not standard. There was an extension cord run from the garage to the crawl, power tools maybe, and a sleeping bag in the attic, smaller than average. He coughed, a dry sound. We recovered a mask, the kind you described. A clown, I said. White with a red mouth, he said. No prints on it we can use. Was it a kid? I asked. I heard my voice and wanted to pull the question back into my chest, get rid of it before it made a shape in the air. He didn't answer that either, not directly. We see patterns, he said. Sometimes kids get pulled into things. Sometimes people use what's small to make excuses for what's not. Either way, the footage shows what it shows. What does it show? A kid walking into an empty house like it wasn't empty to him, he said. And then, later, someone taller walking out the back. I felt something in me close softly, like a door pulled shut so it doesn't click. So I was a stop, I said. On the way. You were visible, he said, and I pictured my listing photos again. The staged brightness, the directions to the open houses I'd posted on a neighborhood board. I thought about the lockbox code changed last week and the doorbell reset and the quiet moment at 2 a.m. when my house felt like it had turned its face toward something listening. I went back to the house during daylight to meet the cleaning crew. They told me to leave the attic hatch open so they could vacuum any stray insulation. I stood in my bedroom and looked at the vent cover and felt ridiculous and very nearly cried. Then I laughed instead, a short sound that startled me with its hardness. I took down the for sale sign myself that afternoon, even though the house was under contract and the realtor would have preferred to do it professionally. I put the sign face down in the garage and felt a petty surge of control. On a petty surge, you can ride longer than you'd think. On my last night there, after the cleaners had hauled the last bag of dust out, I left the porch light on and sat on the bottom stair with a cup of coffee I didn't want. The house was echo again. From the front window, you can see the corner where Willow meets Fairfield. A group of teenagers, loud with the aftertaste of Halloween, walked past, one kicking at a leaf pile. A mother pushed a stroller. A man in a beanie carried a pizza box like a treasure. Across the street, Mrs. I. Hargreaves's house looked like a prop. Lights off, shades down, the kind of empty that pretends to be orderly. The detective said they'd keep an eye. He said there would be patrols more often for a while. He said a lot of things, most of them kind and the rest necessary. At some point I realized my coffee had gone cold. At some point I turned off the porch light and went upstairs and lay on top of the covers and did not sleep. When the refrigerator clicked off, my heart made the leap it had learned, and I listened. The house breathed. After a while, it made a settling sound like a person changing their mind. I liked that and held on to it. In the morning, I locked the door behind me and listened to the lock's mechanics, the way the bolt throws, the way the cylinder catches. I waited for the sound to give me something, permission, completion, closure, but all locks can do is turn. The moving truck idled at the curb. The driver looked bored, then impatient, then just professional. I handed him the last box, the one with the framed picture I'd taken off the mantel at the end because I'd convinced myself it didn't matter anymore. When I closed the truck's roll-up door, it rattled like a sheet of thunder. As we pulled away, the house, stood with its windows blank. At the corner, while we waited for the light, I saw a small figure on the sidewalk a block down, a kid in a hoodie, head tilted the way the clown had tilted his, listening to something only he could hear. Kids tilt their heads. People tilt their heads. The world asks questions that way. I stared until the truck turned and the view closed, and I told myself firmly that what I'd seen was a hoodie and not a mask, that what I'd heard in the night had been a house and not a person. The detective's voice in my memory said patterns, and my own voice answered with the new knowledge patterns give you. I had been visible. I had been the last house on Willow Street with a light on and a bowl by the door. There's a reason we tell kids to take only the candy they're given. The trick is always something else. Weeks later, in the new apartment with drywall still smelling like gypsum and the upstairs neighbor's footsteps directly over my ceiling, a letter arrived with no return address. Inside was a single photo. My old bedroom, empty, blinds open. The angle was from the doorway. Perfectly normal, almost boring, except for a shadow in the corner that didn't belong to anything anymore because there was nothing in the room to cast it. On the back, in pencil, was an address. Not mine. Mrs. Hargreaves's, and a date. The day after I left. I called the detective. He told me the house had changed hands without incident, that the new owners had installed an alarm system, that patrols hadn't seen anything. He said the photo was unnerving and that they'd look at it and that I should forward the envelope too. He said all the right things. After I hung up, I put the photo in the back of a drawer and told myself I was done looking at it. That night, when the refrigerator clicked off in my new place, the silence fell differently. A new house, a new throat clearing, and I lay listening with what I thought was no fear, and a note under that I couldn't name. Halloween is just a night on a calendar. A mask is just plastic. A paper bag is just paper. A house is just wood and drywall and glass. But windows go both ways, and light attracts life. In the end, that's all I did wrong. I kept the light on. I made it easy to see in, and someone who had learned to move quietly in the in-between spaces, the attics, the crawl spaces, the vacant places that look like nobody but feel like nobody's watching, saw me. The last house on Willow Street is someone else's now. If you drive by, you'll see another car in the driveway, a stroller in the front hall, a wreath on the door that isn't mine. You won't see the attic access from the sidewalk. You won't see the vent above the bedroom. You won't see the hair-thin gap between drywall and top plate that makes a keyhole if you lie flat and patient and listen for silence. You won't unless you're looking for it. And not everyone is. That's what most of us are counting on. That's the mistake. We told ourselves it was about views, but that wasn't true. It was about being the kind of people who could walk into a dead house on Halloween and turn fear into something we controlled. It was about proving that we could stage a nightmare and then call cut. The idea started as a joke in September when Jessa said, "Haunted house videos are lazy," and Derek said, "We could make one in a night that beats half of YouTube." By October, he had a Google Doc called Operation Ghosted with a shot list, fake blood recipe, a floor plan of an abandoned foreclosure on the edge of town, and a title, "We Spent the Night in the Murder House. Gone Wrong." The "gone wrong" was a joke when he typed it. There were 5 of us. Me, camera 2 and editing. Jessa, camera 1 and director. Ty, sound and second pair of hands. Miguel, lights and practical effects. And Derek, the maniac. We were 2 years out of college, hungry and a little mean about it. We made short horror sketches that sometimes got 200,000 views when the algorithm got drunk and generous. We told ourselves we were building a brand. Mostly, we were trying to push past the ordinary fear that we were wasting our 20s in someone else's basement. The house was a 1-story ranch on a cul-de-sac where the grass grew long and the flyers for tree trimming turned to paste on the door. No one had lived there since the bank took it back. That's what we told ourselves anyway. We did a drive-by daylight scout on October 25th. The blinds were closed. A lockbox hung from the front door handle with a realtor's sticker half peeled away. The back window by the kitchen had been replaced with plywood from the inside. We circled, photographed angles, talked framing and blocking, and then we left, leaving nothing except the feeling that we'd already crossed some line. On Halloween night, we met at the storage unit we called the studio. Derek made a ceremony of laying out the props. A retractable knife that clicked and slid into the handle on impact, a bottle of stage blood he'd cooked on the stovetop with corn syrup and cocoa powder, duct tape for that horrible makeshift psycho look, a duffel of thrift store clothes, and a mask Miguel had airbrushed to look like cracked porcelain. "Serial killers don't wear porcelain," I said. "They wear nothing on their face. That's scarier." "Porcelain plays better in thumbnails," Jessa said, and that was that. We had 2 mirrorless cameras with fast lenses, a couple of cheap action cams for corners and reactions, lav mics, a handheld audio recorder, and a portable LED panel with barn doors. We had a generator Derek insisted we wouldn't need. We're battery optimized now. We had exterior signs for production in progress that Miguel had printed at work, and we told ourselves were for safety. We loaded it all into Ty's SUV and laughed too loud because we were nervous and needed the laugh to sound like confidence. Our plan: stage a live exploration with me as the skeptic, Jessa as the narrator, and Derek as the monster who appears in staged beats. Hallway, closet, final chase. Ty would trigger jump scare cues from the living room hub. We wouldn't actually stream live. We'd record and premiere it as if it were live, with the chat turned on and the thumbnail ready to go. It was a lie wrapped in marketing language. Simulated live. And we were good at lying to ourselves about that kind of thing. We parked a block away at 10:11 p.m. to make the street look empty. The cul-de-sac was a kind of bowl, sound pooled there. Someone had a TV on in a house 2 doors down, blue light pulsing behind curtains. The foreclosure sat dark, a smudge of a house, the for sale sign bent by wind or kids. We walked the gear in small loads, quiet without saying we were trying to be. The front door lockbox had been cracked open by someone else, maybe kids, maybe another kind of someone, and the actual knob turned under Derek's hand like it was always meant to. Inside smelled like dust that had absorbed every other smell. It had that soft sound old empty places have, the way they whistle almost inaudibly at edges. Our flashlights made the walls look jaundiced. The living room opened to a dining area with a sliding glass door that looked out at a yard too dark to be a yard. The kitchen was to the left, the bedrooms down a short hall. The thermostat on the wall was dead. There was a white smear on one interior door at chest height like someone had shouldered it open with flour on their shirt. Jessa went efficient and clipped. She had that mode like a director from a behind-the-scenes featurette. "Okay, base camp here," she said, indicating the living room. "Action cams, one in the hall, one in the kitchen doorway, one facing the front door for the opener. Room tone, then wide. Ty, frame the audio log. Let's go by the schedule." The schedule said, 10:30 p.m., cold open at front door. 10:37 p.m., enter living room. We heard stories bit. 10:45 p.m., first knock, Ty. 10:47 p.m., closet beat. Derek appears behind. 11 p.m., bedroom door slam. Ty pulls monofilament. 11:05 p.m., Derek chase through hall near miss. 11:15 p.m., we should leave. Denial. 11:25 p.m., final reveal in kitchen. Derek accidentally gets too close with knife, me bleeding, cut to black. Reveal in outtakes that it was all a prank. It read like arrogance. When I look at it now, I want to tear it up and salt the shreds. We were slower than the schedule. We always were. Cameras fought us. The hall action cam refused to pair. Miguel taped it up and swore like it was personal. Ty recorded room tone, 30 seconds of a house breathing, then smacked the recorder against his thigh like he could jar it into obedience. Derek paced and rolled his shoulders. He was good on camera in a way none of us were. He could hold still and let the lens come to him, like he understood where to place the fear in himself so it would read. He was also the kind of person who cut corners when he got bored. He liked pranks in real life more than he liked acting them. It was part of why Jessa cast him as the maniac. All that energy needed a role. We started at 10:42 p.m. The camera saw a dark house and 5 people trying to make it a set. You don't understand how many things make noise until you try to be quiet in an empty place. Zippers, Velcro, breath. We did the cold open like a late-night TV joke. Jessa to camera. "It's Halloween. We're at a house that locals swear is..." She caught herself, smiled, corrected. "Has a history." She did a line about allegedly subprime mortgage horror, which made me snort, which made the clip feel natural. We were good at this part. We could slip into our roles like clothes. At 10:57 p.m., Ty knocked from the inside of a bedroom to our left, while Jessa stood in the hall telling the story of a kid who had allegedly disappeared here a decade earlier. The knock was the right kind of hollow. Jessa jumped, laughed, kept her patter going. I rolled my eyes and said my skeptic line. The real horror is de règle. And she cut me off with a glare, which would play well. We did the closet beat at 11:04 p.m., but Derek's timing was off. He stepped out too early and Jessa saw him in her peripheral vision, so we had to reset. He swore and made a joke about dying for art, which earned him a stare from Jessa that meant don't. We reset and did it again, and this time he moved like oil. Slid out of the closet in the black of the moment when Jessa turned to grab a prop. Stood behind her at a distance just enough to register, then slipped back when she turned too fast for the camera to catch the full shape of him. We whooped because the monitor playback looked genuinely unsettling. We got cocky. At 11:18 p.m., we did the bedroom door slam. Ty had rigged fishing line to the edge of the door, run it along the baseboard, and looped it around a screw on a side table to give him leverage. On 3, he yanked. The door slammed with an authority we didn't expect in a house this light. Dust puffed out like smoke. Jessa jumped again, but smiled right away and whispered, "Great, great, keep rolling." We were dancing on a wire and thought we were walking a sidewalk. Between beats, we went back to the living room to reset audio and swap batteries. The action cams had red tally lights that strobed when they recorded. In the dark, they looked like small, irritated eyes. I checked our main camera battery and frowned. We had started with 80%. It was at 34. "What the?" I said, and Ty leaned in, frowning too. "Weird power draw tonight," he said. "Maybe cold." "It's 68 degrees, I said. "Ghosts," Derek said in a stage whisper behind his mask. "Stop," Jessa said, not playful this time. We prepped for the 11:25 p.m. finale. The shot would be in the kitchen, me and Jessa reconsidering our decision to be there, deciding to do one last bit because money, Because pride. Because the audience. Derek would enter the frame behind us through the hallway, mask on, move fast, corner us by the back door, a slider with aluminum tracks and a fogged pane, hold the knife against my chest in a way that looked risky but wasn't, and then make a show of slipping, cutting my shirt, fake blood, screaming, "Oh my God, oh my God!" Cut to black. Derek was giddy. He loved doing the thing that made everyone else hold their breath. "Don't lean in," I warned him. "Let the lens do the work. If you put pressure on the blade at all—" "I know how to pull a punch," he said, insulted by the reminder. He was wearing the mask and I couldn't see his eyes. It made it easier to forget he was my friend and react to him like a threat. That's what we wanted for the camera. Miguel checked the knife. He had this meticulous streak when it came to effects, the opposite of Derek's chaos. He clicked the blade in and out, once, twice, showed me the mechanism. Blade disappears into handle on contact, stops short of the hilt, lock prevents full extension, safety notch engaged. He handed it to Derek. Derek twirled it like a baton and I winced. "Stop," Jessa said again, sharper. He stopped. At 11:24 p.m., the lights went weird. The LED panel in the kitchen flickered for a beat, then came back steady. The action cam in the hall blinked off and then on, recording icons solid. "Battery," Ty said, and then, "No, we swapped it." He moved to check the cable that ran to the power bank. He'd decided to hardwire that cam so we wouldn't lose the hallway reveal, and the bank read full. "Loose connection," he said, though he didn't sound convinced. "Roll," Jessa said. "You don't stop a heist because you noticed a camera moved. We rolled." Jessa delivered the line about one last look in the kitchen. I leaned on the counter, framed left, and did my bit about the economics of fear. In the monitor, I saw a long black rectangle behind us, the hall mouth. A shape slid into it with the softness of hands closing curtains. My spine did that electric thing. My brain knew it was Derek, but the animal part didn't. He moved in behind me, mask white, blade down. He let me feel him arrive before he pressed the flat of the blade against my chest. Exactly as rehearsed, not too hard, the way you can almost be gentle with a threat. He whispered, "Got you. For me only, just enough that I could ride it into the moment." I gave him my breath, sharp and high, and his shoulders squared like he was feeding on the reaction because that's what good performers do too. "Knife up," Jessa hissed, and he did. The blade rose between us like a sentence about to be spoken. The knife went in. It happened fast and slow. The knife made a sound I can't describe without sounding ridiculous. Not a slice, exactly, not with all the layers of fabric at my chest. It punched and then resisted. There was pressure where there should have been none. My brain had enough time to think bad prop, and then the hot bloom of something very real spread under my shirt. I said no, which was stupid because of course the whole point was no. The whole point was fear. Derek said, "Oh," like someone tripping on an uneven sidewalk. Jessa shouted, "Cut!" like it could stop physics. The knife came back with reluctance, sticky. Everyone went silent for half a heartbeat because we were trained by video to wait for the moment after the moment. And then I heard my own breath like a bass line, and my hands were on my chest without me telling them to be. And they were wet. Ty swore in a way I'd never heard him swear before, like he was spitting something out. And Miguel said, "That's not, what did you—" And then, sit down," and pushed me onto a chair that didn't exist, so I slid to the floor instead, my back against the cabinet. The world became edges, tile grout lines, the weird brightness of the refrigerator's off-white, the red-coded numbers on the recorder peaking because everyone had started to breathe too loudly. Jessa moved, finally, the way people move in training videos. She pressed her hands to the wound through my shirt, and then yanked her hoodie off and balled it against me because pressure is a word you remember. She said call, and Ty said on it, and then said our location in a rush that included street name, cross street, injury, knife, accidental. He said my name. He said, "Stay with me," like people do in movies. And it didn't sound stupid then. Derek stood 3 feet away holding the knife like someone discovering their hands for the first time. The porcelain mask was off. He had a child's face in that moment, blank with the kind of terror that has no room for crying. He said. "Miguel." Miguel grabbed the knife from him with a towel like he'd been scalded and set it on the counter and looked at it like looking could fix it. He clicked the blade out and in. It did not retract. It was not our prop. "We checked it," Derek said, "and it came out like a defense and a plea and a denial and an accusation all at once." Miguel's face shifted through the same phases and landed on a grim calm. "I checked what I had in my hand," he said. "This isn't it." The sirens were close in less than 3 minutes, but those 3 minutes were a decade. Jessa kept pressing. Ty talked to me like we were miking a guest, keeping the signal alive. "Hey, look at me. Tell me what we named the fake blood." I said, "Corn syrup," which was nothing. We had named it Hemoglobin 2.0 for the thumbnail text, and that detail floats into my head sometimes while I make coffee, and my hands remember the warmth on my chest, and my ribs feel like something inside them learned to grow teeth. Derek said, "To no one and everyone. It's a swap. Someone swapped it." And that was when the room got colder, even though nothing in physics changed, because the only way it made sense was if someone had touched our gear between the storage unit and the kitchen. Ty had kept the prop bag in his trunk until we unloaded. Then we'd set it by the living room hub. We had all left the living room to do the hall beats. Anyone with a key, a code, a grudge, or the nerves to try a door could have walked in while we were busy stage managing fear. The EMTs came with their noise and their light and their competence. They moved me gently and with authority, kept pressure where Jess's shaking hands had been, cut my shirt, shaved hair, taped lines. I was aware enough to feel embarrassed about the shaving, which is how I knew I wasn't dying. I rode to the hospital under a fluorescent sky. Jessa rode with me, one hand on the rail, the other clamped around my phone because she'd taken it from my pocket and because it gave her purpose. The police went to the house. Ty called my sister from my contacts. Miguel shut down the cameras and bagged the knife with his jacket like he'd seen in shows. Derek didn't ride with me. He sat on the curb with his head in his hands and the mask beside him, looking like the still frame of the moment you learn you can't undo something. At the hospital, the ER doctor said, "You're fortunate," which is a word that should never be used in a sentence that also includes knife. The blade had slid between ribs and missed what needed to be missed. There was blood in places blood shouldn't go, but not in the catastrophic ways. They cleaned and stitched and monitored. They asked questions that sounded like they were reading from a list that starts with how and then quickly goes to who. I answered what I could. It wasn't much. By 3 a.m., I was lying in a room with the lights down low and the monitors doing their gentle beeps like the hospital was a spaceship in a movie. Jessa sat in a chair and didn't sleep. She looked like someone who had aged a year in an hour. Ty texted updates from the house. "Cops pulled the action cam cards. They're going to want your footage too." Then, "Lockbox at front door wasn't ours. Realtor says code changed last week, but lockbox had different serial." Then, "Neighbor across the street has a ring cam. Police grabbed footage." At 5 a.m., the detective came to my room. He had that early morning look of men who have learned to turn off parts of their humanity between midnight and dawn so they can do their job. He introduced himself, told me my friends were giving statements, told me he would want mine later, and asked if I was up for hearing a few things. I said yes, because the other option was being alone with the sound of machines that were making sure I stayed present. He said, "Your friend Miguel is adamant the prop knife was retractable. We found one in the living room near your base setup. It was wrapped in tape like someone had bundled gear fast. The knife we recovered from the kitchen is a real one. It's a cheap chef's knife. The blade's been ground on a wheel, marks still hot." "Hot?" I said stupidly. "Figuratively," he said. "Recent. We found a glove in the yard. Nitrile. No prints. Because that's what gloves are for. He flipped a page on his notebook. Realtor says their lockbox was on the door last week. The one we found tonight is a different brand. Someone swapped it. The issue is, there's no sign of forced entry elsewhere. Backslider is locked from inside. Bedroom windows painted shut from when the bank had it sprayed. Kitchen window plywood is screwed from the inside, so someone used a key or a code. We didn't, I said. We just turned the knob. He nodded. Right, because someone else turned it earlier. He told me the ring cam across the street caught a car at 10:36 p.m., a compact sedan, late model, dark. Park at the end of the cul-de-sac with its lights off. A person got out, hood up, face down, walked to the house, and went inside at 10:38 p.m., 2 minutes before we opened with the front door shut. The same person left at 11:20 p.m., 2 minutes before our finale. He said the timing was almost careful. Almost, I said. If it were careful, we'd have seen them arrive and leave between your own movements, he said. This looks like someone who wanted to brush up against you and not be seen, but also didn't worry if they were. Fan, I said. Hater. He shrugged in a way that said yes, and there are other words too. You publicize your shoots, he said. You leave signals. That has advantages. It has other effects too. He asked about enemies. We gave him a few usernames of people who had been particularly obsessive in our comments, but it felt thin as soon as we said them out loud. He asked if anyone new had access to our storage unit. We said no, but both of us thought about the cracked strip of weather stripping on the door, the tiny gap where lock meets jam that isn't much but invites certain kinds of people to try. He asked if we'd let anyone outside the 5 see the shot list. Jessa said yes, sorry. She'd sent it in a group text to 2 friends because she wanted feedback on the wardrobe choice, and only realized afterward that the link had public settings, that anyone with it could view. She looked like she wanted to be punished. At daylight, I watched the kitchen footage on my phone because the detective asked if I could handle it and because I needed to know what we had invited into our control. The images were clean, the audio crisp. We looked like professionals staging a horror scene. The moment of the knife was a glitch in physics, a wrongness that arrived with no cue lighting, no swell of music. It just happened. But the worst part wasn't the moment. It was the minute before. On the hall action cam, facing the dark rectangle Derek would enter from, you can see a figure stand just inside the hall on the right, half in a doorway, careful in that way people are when they're observing. The figure is not Derek. The mask is different. No mask, maybe. And the head is angled in a way that won't show a face to even the most curious pixel peeper. The figure lifts a hand and adjusts something on the side of our hall cam mid-roll. Then the figure retreats down the hall seconds before Derek moves into frame. We hadn't seen that in real time. Ty had been in the living room monitoring the wrong feeds. We were playing our rehearsed fear. We were good at it. We missed the moment someone else made themselves part of the scene. The detective paused that frame, the almost face smudged by cheap sensor noise. That, he said neutral, is why we think this was deliberate. He looked at me. The knife was one thing, but this is communication. What are they saying? I asked. He closed the tablet. They're saying they were there. I spent a night in the hospital, and then a week at home pretending to heal faster than I was. The pain was a stubborn animal that went quiet when I thought about it too hard, and then bit when I tried to ignore it. The channel posted a statement. Comments flooded with anger and conspiracy and jokes. The police asked us not to release the footage. We didn't. We thought about it, which says something shameful about who we were and what we had taught ourselves to value. But we didn't. Derek came by with flowers and apologies shaped like words we'd learned in group projects. My fault, our fault, failure of process. He didn't touch the subject of the way the knife had felt in his hand, but the way he held his fingers around his coffee cup told me that his body remembered too. Jessa brought me a fleece blanket she said was for post-production naps, and we both laughed at the idea that there would be a post or a production we would go back to like nothing had changed. Miguel installed a new deadbolt on my apartment and didn't meet my eyes while he worked. We learned that the car in the Ring video had been reported once before, idling outside a different empty house in a different neighborhood the week prior. We learned that the lockbox on the foreclosure had been swapped with a hardware store model anyone could buy with cash. We learned the prop knife in our living room bag had our fingerprints all over it, and the real knife didn't have any. We learned there are people who study our habits like we study cinematography. "Will you film Halloween again?" a nurse asked me when I went in for a follow-up. She asked like it was small talk, and maybe it was. I said no, and it sounded final even to me. The video files from that night live on an external drive in a drawer. Sometimes I tell myself I'll go in and pull a still of the moment before, the last frame where we were doing the thing we set out to do and the world hadn't made its correction yet. Other times I tell myself I'll delete it all and salt the backups and pretend we never had the thought. The truth sits in the middle. The footage exists. So does the person who came into our story and wrote a line we didn't script. So does the knife in a police evidence bin with a tag and a case number, ordinary now in a way that should make it harmless and doesn't. The prank that went too far is how we talk about it still. But that phrase is another one of our lies. We didn't push anything past the limit. We drew a target and stood inside it. We said we wanted the feeling of edge without the risk, and forgot that edges belong to more than one side. We told ourselves we were controlling fear. We were just inviting someone who loves control more than we do to show us how it's really done. If I ever shoot again, it won't be in a house with paper flyers turning to paste on the door. It won't be in a place where a lock can be replaced in the dark. It won't be for people who only feel anything when a stranger bleeds on their screen. Halloween is just a night. A knife is a tool. A camera is a permission slip. We handed ours to someone who didn't need one and learned what gone wrong looks like when it isn't in parentheses. My name's Andrew Cole, and if you drive south on Highway 41 through Kern County, past the stretch where the oil pumps look like metal birds dipping their beaks into the dirt, you'll see a faded billboard that still reads, Harvest Haven Pumpkin Patch. Family fun. Since 1978. That's where I used to work the night shift. Back in 2019, I was 26, broke, and trying to hold together 2 jobs in a car that stalled more than it ran. My cousin Tom managed the patch every fall, so he offered me a seasonal gig, guarding the property after closing. Easy money, he said. Just keep vandals and bored teens out. Walk the field once an hour. Don't fall asleep. It sounded perfect. No customers, no bosses breathing down my neck. Just me, the pumpkins, and the stars. If I'd known what really happened there the previous Halloween, I would have said no. Harvest Haven sat on 20 acres of flat land, surrounded by fields that stretched so far they could swallow sound. During the day it was cheerful, kids screaming on hay rides, the smell of funnel cakes, country music from tin speakers. At night, it was nothing but wind and black soil. Tom gave me the rundown before leaving. Walk the rows once in a while, lock the sheds at midnight, lights go off at 1. If the motion sensor trips, check it from the booth before you go wandering. And don't freak out if you hear coyotes. They hang out by the tree line. Got it, I said. He handed me a thermos of coffee and a walkie-talkie. Oh, and if you see any kids messing around near the old scarecrow, just chase them off. People dare each other to mess with it every year. What's so special about it? Tom smirked. You'll see. When the last family left and the carnival lights blinked out, silence rushed in. Not the kind you get in cities, the heavy kind where the air itself listens. I walked the rows, flashlights sweeping over hundreds of pumpkins glistening under dew, their vines crawling like veins through the soil. The scarecrow stood dead center in the biggest field, a man-shaped shadow with a wide-brimmed hat, arms outstretched like he was blessing the harvest. It looked ordinary enough. Denim overalls, plaid shirt, straw hands tied with twine. The only strange thing was the head, a burlap sack drawn tight and painted with a crude black smile. Its eyes were cut unevenly, one higher than the other, like it was squinting. I caught myself staring too long. Creepy bastard, I muttered, and kept walking. Around midnight, the wind picked up. The corn maze rustled behind me like someone whispering 1,000 small words. The motion light by the shed flicked on. Probably raccoons, I told myself and checked the monitor in the booth. The screen showed the entrance gate, the maze, and the north fence. Nothing. Just shifting shadows. Still, I felt the pull to check. Habit, I guess. The shed door creaked when I opened it. Tools lined the walls, rakes, shovels, a gas can. Everything looked normal, except for a muddy footprint on the floor. Barefoot, small. My first thought was that some kid had snuck in earlier and was hiding. I looked under the workbench, behind the hay bales. Nothing. When I stepped outside again, the motion light turned off, and I realized how dark the patch really was. Even the stars seemed dimmer. The scarecrow stood about 40 yards away. For a second, I swore its head was tilted differently, looking toward the shed. I laughed, but it came out shaky. Wind must have done it, I said aloud. But there wasn't enough wind to move a nailed-down post. Tom dropped off my pay envelope and a half-hearted, "Thanks, cuz." He looked tired. "Everything fine last night?" he asked. "Yeah, just raccoons. Though that scarecrow gives me the creeps." He chuckled. "You're not the first, but don't move it. People around here are superstitious. Old man Reeve, the guy who owned this place before us, he said the scarecrow was a blessing post. Keeps the soil good or something. He died out there, though. Heart attack, I think." That part he said too casually. "Out there, by the scarecrow?" "Yeah, they found him sitting against it, hat still on his head. Doctor said it was natural causes. Anyway, see you tomorrow." He drove off before I could ask more. The night started quiet again. I listened to old country songs through my earbuds while writing notes in the logbook. Around 1 a.m., the motion alarm beeped. Northfield. I checked the monitor. This time there was movement, a flicker near the scarecrow. I zoomed in. For a second I thought I saw someone standing beside it. A thin silhouette, pale in the camera's low-light grain. The figure leaned toward the scarecrow, then vanished. I grabbed the flashlight and jogged out. My boots sank into the soft dirt. "Hello? Private property," I called. No answer. When I reached the scarecrow, the ground around it was disturbed, like someone had been digging. A small mound of dirt sat near the post. I shined the light closer and saw what looked like a piece of rope sticking out. I knelt and brushed it aside. Not rope? Straw, torn from the scarecrow's stuffing. Then I noticed its left arm hanging lower than before, the twine frayed, and under its hand, half buried in soil, was something small and white. I brushed more dirt away, a baby tooth. I dropped it and stumbled back. The wind gusted through the corn, carrying something that almost sounded like a laugh or a cough. I ran back to the booth and locked the door. In the morning, I told Tom what I saw. He didn't laugh, which scared me more. "Yeah," he said slowly. "We find weird stuff out there sometimes. Kids leave junk, bones, dolls, that kind of thing. It's a dare thing. Feed the scarecrow, they call it, local TikTok trend. Nothing to worry about. Kids don't lose teeth that way." He hesitated. "Look, Drew, I need this season to go smooth. County inspections next week. Don't start stories, okay? Finish the week, and I'll give you a bonus." I wanted to argue, but the extra $50 shut me up. Bills don't care about ghosts. The next night felt wrong before it even started. The air smelled like metal. The lights flickered while I clocked in. My thermos tasted off, like the water had turned sour. Around midnight, fog rolled in from the fields, thick enough to swallow the fence line. The cameras glitched with static, one by one. The only one still working was the view of the scarecrow. I sat in the booth, staring at that grainy figure on the screen. For 30 minutes, it didn't move. Then, right around 12:47, the feed shook, like something hit the pole. The scarecrow's head turned. Not fully, just enough for the dark hole of an eye to face the camera. The video cut out. I don't remember grabbing the flashlight or stepping outside. I just remember my legs moving on their own, crunching over gravel. "It's vandal kids," I kept saying. "That's all." Halfway across the field, the fog thickened. My light beam felt shorter, swallowed before it reached the ground. Then I heard it, rustling, like someone walking beside me in tall grass. "Tom," I called, though I knew he wasn't there. "Russell, stop." Then a voice, soft, right behind me. "Andrew." I spun around. Empty fog. "Who's there?" The whisper came again, closer. "You shouldn't have touched it." My stomach dropped. Touched what? The root. Something cold brushed my hand, soft like straw. I swung the flashlight. Nothing. When I turned back toward the scarecrow, the beam caught a shape kneeling beside it. For one impossible second, it looked like a man digging with bare hands, his back hunched, shoulders shaking. He was wearing a wide-brimmed hat. "Hey!" I shouted. The figure froze. Then it slowly stood, dirt falling from its fingers. The fog shifted just enough for me to see the face, or what was left of one. Half burlap, half skin. The mouth sewn shut except for a split down the center. The scarecrow beside it was gone. I ran. Branches clawed my jacket as I tore through the maze path. My flashlight dropped somewhere behind me. I didn't stop for it. The fog closed like a wall. I crashed through dry stalks until I hit the fence and climbed, scraping my palms raw. On the other side, I tripped into the ditch and stayed there, shaking until dawn. When the sun came up, the fog was gone. So was the figure. But the scarecrow was standing again in the middle of the field, perfectly upright. Only now its burlap head had 2 fresh holes where the mouth stitches had ripped. Tom called the sheriff after I refused to go back in. They walked the field, laughed about city nerves, and took a short report. "No signs of trespassers," one deputy said. "Just you scaring yourself." I quit on the spot. 2 nights later, Tom called me, his voice shaking. "You might have been right," he said. "We found something. They dug under the scarecrow post to fix the irrigation pipe. What they found wasn't pipe. It was bones. Small ones. A child's. DNA tests took months. They said the remains belonged to a boy missing since 1998. His name was Eli Reeve, the son of the farm's original owner. No one could explain why his body was there, or how the scarecrow's post had been driven straight through his ribcage like a stake. Tom sold the patch the next year, said he was done with family businesses. I tried to forget. Moved 2 towns over, started working warehouse nights, bright lights, cameras, people. But every October the dreams came, always the same. I'm back in the fog, flashlight dead, someone breathing just behind me. And when I turn, the scarecrow's face isn't burlap anymore. It's mine. In 2022, curiosity or stupidity got the better of me. I drove down Highway 41 just to see if the place was still standing. It was. The new owners rebranded it Pumpkin Paradise, added new signage, brighter colors, more family-friendly nonsense. But in the middle of the main field, there it was, the scarecrow. Different clothes, same crooked head. A maintenance guy noticed me staring. "Creepy, huh?" he said. "We found that old thing buried in the shed. Owner says it's part of the heritage aesthetic." He laughed. "They say some nut-job guard years ago claimed it moved at night." "Yeah," I said. "I heard that story. I wanted to tell him to burn it, to salt the ground, but he walked away before I could open my mouth. I started getting emails from an address I didn't recognize. rootkeeper41@protonmail.com. The first one said only, "The field remembers you." The second came with an image attachment, grainy night footage from a security camera. Me, sitting in my car by the fence, looking through the window at the scarecrow. The timestamp was from the day I drove past, though I never got out. The third email had no text. Just a video file named harvesthaven.move. It started with static. Then the same field appeared, moonlit. The scarecrow stood still for a moment. Then its head turned, slowly, until it faced the camera. Something crawled out from behind it. A child-sized shape made of dirt and straw. It looked at the camera with a face that wasn't formed right. A voice, thin, distorted, whispered, "Come finish your shift." The file ended there. No metadata, no traceable IP. I deleted it, emptied the trash, and threw my laptop charger out the window. Still, at night, I'd hear that line in my head. You shouldn't have touched it. This year, I made the worst decision of my life. I went back, not for answers, just to end the wondering. I told myself I'd burn the thing, purge it, salt the ground, whatever it took. I brought a gas can and a box of matches. Drove out after midnight, when the highways were empty and the moon looked like a rusted coin. The new owners had closed early because of wind warnings. The gate was chained, but I climbed over. The field was the same. Long rows of pumpkins, frost glittering on their skins. The scarecrow waited in the middle, like it had been expecting me. "All right," I said out loud. My voice shook. "Let's finish this." I poured the gasoline in a circle, soaked the post, and struck a match. The flame caught fast, too fast, like the straw had been waiting to burn. Fire climbed the figure's arms, flared across the chest. The face blackened, then split. For a moment, I thought I saw something move inside the sack, a twitch, a convulsion. Then the wind howled, and the fire blew sideways, nearly knocking me off my feet. When the smoke cleared, the scarecrow was gone. The post still stood, but the figure itself had vanished. All that remained was the hole where the post had been driven, and something shining inside it. I crouched, heart hammering. It was a tooth, small, human, the same one I'd seen years ago. Before I could move, the ground shifted under me, a soft sound like soil breathing. I stumbled back. A hand, gray, straw-threaded small, reached up from the hole and gripped my boot. I kicked free and ran, didn't stop until I reached the car. My headlights caught the field one last time. The scarecrow was standing again, untouched, smoke still curling from its hat. In its right hand hung a scrap of my jacket. I don't sleep much anymore. When I do, I dream of rows of orange and black and the sound of dirt moving underfoot. Sometimes I wake to the smell of smoke. Once, I found straw in my sheets. I moved again, changed my number, even tried therapy. My doctor says it's trauma, a symbolic manifestation of guilt. But he doesn't know that last week a package arrived on my porch. No return address. Inside was a handful of pumpkin seeds, a small burlap patch with a crooked smile drawn in black ink, and a note that read, "Next harvest starts soon. You're on shift." I burned the note. Flushed the seeds. Didn't matter. Because last night, when I looked out my apartment window, there was a pumpkin sitting on the fire escape, perfectly round, freshly cut with a grin too wide, and one tooth missing. If you ever get a job guarding a pumpkin patch, and they tell you about the scarecrow in the middle of the field, don't touch it. Don't even look at it after dark. And if you hear someone whisper your name from the fog, don't answer. They're not talking to you. They're talking through you.